The imbalance in the Tier 0 world is actually kind of interesting to be tracking. Make sure you guys smash the crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on more awesome content. So next plays numbers have been dwindling out here, and I think a lot of the result of this is because of the current impact that their meta is feeling right now. And I can't really blame players for not wanting to necessarily play in this format. It's one of those formats that you look at and you're like, hey, we just came out of a Tier 0 meta. You know, we're going to go ahead and return back into another one. But I'll talk more about that here in a little bit. So, your Swiss rounds for this week are abysmal. Like, this is actually horrible. You had 4 Ryzel decks in the room. And, of course, I mean, once you're grinding against Ryzel week after week after week, I can understand the toll that this is taking on the player base. We also had 2 Rescue Ace decks. So, the only challengers to this week to Ryzel are literally 2 Rescue Ace players, and everything else is a one-of. So we had 1 branded player attempting to take on the Ryzel challenge. We also had 1 copy of Blue Eyes White Dragon. You know, even post that starter deck, the deck is... I'm sorry, it's not keeping up in Ryzel purgatory. We did have a Memento Challenger this week, which I think is probably one of the more interesting things to be seeing out of this. We also had 1 Malice. You know, Malice, for such an early stage of this format, was really doing well. It was keeping up so very nicely, but things have fallen very, very badly. We also had 1 Minkanko control, so it would appear that we're still getting some sort of representation with that deck, which I think is kind of good. We also had Fire King still doing relatively strong, and 1 Snake Eyes, and it appears we also have an anti-meta challenger out here as well. Now, shifting on in to your top cut, since this is so small here, we are packing in 2 Ryzel players. So you had a pretty decent conversion out here. Actually seeing that a good chunk of our Ryzel players were able to convert on over into this top cut doesn't really surprise me all that much. Especially with these numbers. Like I said, players just don't want to deal with Ryzel right now. They're so just off-putted by this meta. Like, it's actually kind of crazy. We also do have 1 Fire King challenger down here. In the current state that Azamina Snake Eyes has kind of been left in, even if this build is, you know, trying to take advantage of that engine, it just doesn't necessarily feel like it's accomplishing things. Obviously, putting Deception on the field, you know, putting up the wall of negates, it's got its chances to do well, but it's just that. Surprisingly to me, though, the deck that came out on top this event was actually Memento. And I think the reason why Memento did so well is because Ryzel has kind of stripped itself of playing Shifter. Even though Shifter is the free turn skip that it is, because Malice exists in the meta, Ryzel has to strip out Shifter and opt to not play it. Unfortunately, by making that call, though, you're kind of leaving the deck a little bit more vulnerable, and that's why something like Memento can kind of come in here and actually kind of destroy the meta and make people kind of realize and go, oh, hey, you know, there's something to this shift around out here. We need to kind of take a look and kind of readjust and see what we can do. So I do find that kind of interesting, but this is your resemblance of a top cut here. Let's pass on over to those deck lists. So winning our event here is Memento. And the reason why we're even taking a look at this event is just to look at the challengers out here that are attempting to beat Ryzel meta. And I think that's probably your most interesting call out here is which decks can do relatively well against this deck. This build still having access to Apollousa must be nice. I also do see that we have triple Fouloirs, triple Perulia access, which is crazy. We're also playing the Fractured Ants in the main deck. Of course, 1 Tack Talents, 2 Call Bites. You're basically playing all the anti-meta cards that you need to, but keep in mind, this build's not doing any of the Goblin spell card. They've actually stripped out that stuff from this build, which, That's a little bit interesting. You know, I thought that you would need to be clinging on to that stuff, but this build breaks that mold and shows that we don't have to rely on that, which is pretty good. Now, we also have Ryzol back here. Well, you're going to be seeing this deck a lot. Triple Fouloirs in the main. So we're playing Veilers with a triple ash, 2 Max C, 2 copies of good old Ogre with 1 field spell. Man, just having 7/7 Tachyon access is crazy. I think the thing that they're going to have to do to this deck, basically this deck being Zoodiac 2.0 out here, just much more consistent. I am very curious to know how they're going to attempt to clean up this problem that they made. Like, Ultimate Slayer is a good alternative to this, but it is not stopping the problem. Like, if you're landing the Ultimate Slayer, which, I mean, you're probably cleaning up the Dreadnator for sure, it's everything else kind of around the Dreadnator that kind of creates the issue that I think people are having to deal with. Also, this build stripped out the SP, doesn't even need it. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting to see. I mean, all of your rank 4 access you need is all present, just generic good floodgate cleanups. All right, our Fire King list back here. First of all, I'm happy to see that Fire King is doing something, considering how much the Snake Eyes deck has been stripped down. Like, they really, like, the Diabellstar to 1, the Wanted to 1. Like, the Deception package is the only reason why this deck is even getting a remote chance of doing well right now. Also, the Triple Fouloirs, double Maxi, the real challenge. I also like the fact this deck is playing the Sacred Garunix in here. The rank 8 actually seeing some play. And of course, I mean, playing Ultimate Slayer down here in the side deck, once again, you need a card to go Curse Splat against the Challenger. Like, if you can get that off. I also see we are citing a Dominus Impulse down here as well. And of course, everybody's on Lancia because I don't want to lose to Malice. I can't really blame them for that. You know what I mean? Malice is just a big old blowout if it actually resolves. Well, okay. And then our other Ryzol list back here. Now, this list, this is interesting. So we're on 2 Fouloirs, 2 Maxi, 2 Droll and Lockbird. I guess the Droll also acts as a supplemental force out here for the Crossout Designator as another card for you to be able to ping. And of course, this build is playing 2 Ryzol Cross. I am not opposed to playing 2 Cross. I think that the big thing that you need to be aware of, though, if you're going about that, is you just have to play very cautiously when that's presented. And that's fine. 2 versus 1. Like, if you see the second one, well, then you're good to go. I also see that this build is playing a Scythe package, of course, down here in the side deck. I love the 1/1, just so you can toggle on into it off of the 1 of Thrust. Okay. And of course, nice 1 of Nibiru. This deck really does get tacked out when it actually needs to. So that's your deck list. I want to pass on over to something else. So actually, last week, the results from Next Play was actually this pie chart that you're seeing here. Now, keep in mind there were only 18 participants in this event, but the big discussion last week was, oh my gosh, you know, it's finally happening. You know, Japan's in a tier 0 meta. I mean, I've seen a lot of Ryzol list out here, and I get it, all right? The one tournament that does post a list all the time, you see this, I can see why you would be pretty much discouraged from things. I do want to point out here that this has not been the case everywhere. There have been challengers in certain sectors. This is still an issue, though. All right, if an entire tournament is dominated by this level of craziness, then it's going to get around that players are going to be discouraged. You know, we're finally at a point right now that the TCG meta doesn't feel like absolute dog water. It still is a little bit bad, but when you have a deck like this, it's just light years ahead of the rest of the meta. Because, you know, you made decisions and cut things back. Had the OCG not hit things, I think there would have been more decks trying to keep up with this. But when you knock down the pedestal and you don't put anything else into the meta to really try to challenge this, then you kind of get the situation that the OCG's in right now, that this deck is just the dominator. Nothing is going to change with that. And the TCG, I know players are kind of looking at this as the doomsday clock, and it very well could be. But we need to be patient. We need to see what's going to happen. And we need to just be ready for the counter challenger. You know, we do have good cards. Our meta does have some options. You know, we have Ultimate Slayer, but ultimately, we'll have to wait and see. So please leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think. I'll see your beautiful faces back later in the day, guys. Peace. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.